My brother is 30 years old and living in my parents' guest room. He's been there almost a year. From what I hear, he's working part-time at a sporting goods store, going to therapy twice a week, and telling anyone who asks that he's in a transitional period. My ex-wife got engaged to someone she met at a CrossFit class 6 weeks after our divorce was finalized. I saw it on LinkedIn before I quietly removed her from my connections. And I'm sitting in a 2-bedroom apartment in Portland, Oregon, with hardwood floors and a partial view of the river. And a rescue dog named Chief at my feet. And a phone number that nobody from my old life has. That's the ending. Here's everything that came before it. For most of my adult life, I was the one who made things work. Not because anyone asked me to be. I just was. I graduated from Georgia Tech in 3.5 years, took an entry-level project coordination role at a civil infrastructure firm in Atlanta, worked my way into senior management by 31, bought a house in Decatur at 29, with a down payment I'd scraped together. Over 7 years of eating lunch at my desk and driving a 2011 Honda Civic with 140,000 miles on it. I didn't ask my parents for money. Not for college, which I funded through scholarships and part-time work. Not for the house. Not for anything. I'm not saying that to make myself sound noble. I'm saying it because it matters to what came next. My brother Gavin is 5 years younger than me. He's always been the one my parents worried about, which in our household translated into the one they devoted most of their energy to. Gavin is creative, they would say. Gavin is sensitive. Gavin just needs the right opportunity. He spent 2 years in Los Angeles after college trying to break into documentary filmmaking. Burned through the $38,000 our grandmother left us both. Came back at 26 with a hard drive, full of footage that never became anything. And a list of reasons why the industry was broken. My parents told him the industry just needed to catch up to his vision. They said this with complete sincerity. He went back to LA at 28 for a second attempt. New connections, new idea, new energy. Lasted 14 months that time before calling our father to say it hadn't worked out and asking if he could come home. Home by then was a 4-bedroom house in Alpharetta. Plenty of room, theoretically. But my mother had converted the guest room into a sewing space, and my father had claimed the other spare room for his model trains. And somehow, without anyone quite saying it out loud, the solution that emerged was that Gavin should stay with me. My wife Talia and I had been married 5 years by then. We met at a company event. She was doing marketing consultancies, a firm that contracted with ours, and she walked up to me at the appetizer table and said something funny about the shrimp cocktail. And that was it. I'm not good at meeting people. She made it easy. We got married in a small ceremony in Savannah. Bought the Decatur house together in spirit even though the deed was in my name alone. And talked about kids the way you talk about something you want, but aren't quite ready to say out loud yet. I had a prenuptial agreement. My attorney had insisted, and I hadn't fought him on it. Talia signed it before the wedding without making it into a whole thing, which I took as a sign of maturity and security. The agreement was straightforward. Assets acquired before the marriage remained individual property. The Decatur house, purchased 8 months before our wedding date, was mine. When my parents asked if Gavin could stay with us, I said yes without thinking about it. Talia said it was fine. The spare room was just storage anyway. I told Gavin 3 months, maybe 4, save some money, put together a real plan, get back on his feet. He nodded seriously. The way he always nodded seriously. Right before doing none of what he'd agreed to do. That year, I was the project director on a highway overpass expansion outside Marietta. A $40 million state contract, with a compressed timeline and a general contractor who needed daily hand-holding. I was leaving the house before 7 most mornings and rarely back before 8 at night. Sometimes later, I'd text Talia from the job site when a meeting ran long. She'd text back that she and Gavin had eaten already. There were leftovers in the fridge. I told myself that was fine. That it was good she wasn't sitting home alone. That having someone around during the day was better than an empty house. I told myself a lot of things. The day I found out was a Wednesday in March. A subcontractor inspection got canceled at 4 in the afternoon, and I sent Talia a text saying I was heading home early. She read it, the little read receipt appeared immediately, and didn't answer. I came in through the garage. The kitchen light was on, a bottle of Malbec was open on the counter, about half gone. 2 glasses. The television in the living room was off. I stood in the kitchen for a moment in the particular silence of a house that doesn't know you've arrived yet. I don't need to walk you through the geometry of the next 60 seconds. You can fill that in. What I'll tell you is that I said 3 words, "Get out now," in a voice I didn't recognize as mine. And then I went and sat in my truck in the garage, with the door closed. And the engine off for somewhere between 20 minutes and 2 hours. I genuinely don't know how long I was out there. That night I drove to a Marriott off I-285. And checked in under my own name with my corporate card. I called my divorce attorney from the parking lot. She answered even though it was past 8, because she'd seen enough of these situations to know that they don't schedule themselves conveniently. The next morning I sent a text to my parents saying I needed to see them, family only, that evening. They started calling immediately, asking what was wrong. If someone was hurt, if I was okay. I didn't answer the calls. I just showed up at their kitchen table at 6:30 and told them what I'd found. My mother covered her mouth. My father went still in the way he gets when he's processing something he doesn't want to process. I watched them absorb it. And, for about 45 seconds, I remember this clearly. I thought one of them was going to say the right thing. My mother reached across the table and put her hand on mine. She took a breath. She said, "What are people going to think? Not I'm sorry. Not we're here. Not what do you need from us. What are people going to think?" My father picked up the thread from there. He talked about the community. About the church they'd been attending for 20 years. About Aunt Deb's annual 4th of July party, where half the neighborhood would be there. And everyone would notice if Talia wasn't beside me. He talked about how a divorce would be public record. And how that kind of thing traveled in a town the size of Alpharetta. And how he wasn't minimizing what had happened. Not at all. But, there were ways to handle things that preserved a family and ways that didn't. And, maybe if I could just give it some time. I counted. 11 minutes before either of them said a single word about what had actually happened to me. I drove back to the Marriott and lay on top of the comforter and thought about the fact that I had just told my parents, my wife and my brother were sleeping together in my house, and their first instinct was to think about the 4th of July party. The divorce moved quickly. The prenup was airtight. My attorney said it was one of the cleaner agreements she'd reviewed in years. She'd reviewed hundreds. Talia was entitled to her personal property, her vehicle, and the modest amount she'd contributed to our joint savings account. The house remained mine. She didn't contest it. We were legally dissolved in 9 weeks. My parents asked me to come back to their house before the paperwork was final. They sat me down with Gavin in the next room. I could hear him in there, the specific silence of someone trying not to be heard. And told me they'd had a lot of conversations about this, and they wanted to share some thoughts. My father said, "What Gavin did is wrong. We're not saying otherwise, but he's young, he makes bad decisions, he always has. And he's destroyed himself over this. You've seen him." My mother said, "You're the strong one. You've always been the one who could handle hard things. We're not asking you to forget what happened. We're asking you to remember that he's your brother. Blood doesn't disappear because of a terrible mistake." My father said, "Think about what this family looks like in 5 years if you go nuclear. Think about holidays. Think about the long game. You're the only one of us who can see the long game." I looked at both of them for a long moment. I said, "Okay." My father exhaled. My mother reached over and put her hand on my arm. Relief crossed both their faces. The particular relief of people who've just narrowly avoided a consequence they weren't prepared for. They thought okay meant agreement. They thought it meant I was choosing the long game. Choosing family unity. Choosing to swallow it. They didn't know what I was actually choosing. 2 weeks after that conversation, I met with my HR department to update the beneficiary designations on my 401(a) and company life insurance policy. My parents' names came off, Gavin's name came off. I named my college roommate, a guy named Perry. Wait, that's taken. A guy I'd stayed close with since freshman year. The paperwork took about 40 minutes. The week the divorce was finalized, the house in Decatur went on the market. The Atlanta market was hot that spring. I had 3 offers in 6 days and accepted one at $23,000 over asking. I cleared a little over $200,000 after commission and closing costs. Those funds went into a brokerage account that my parents had never known existed, and that was not in any document they could access. I gave notice at my firm the same week. I'd been in quiet contact with a project development company in Portland since the previous November. They'd reached out about a principal director position, and I'd politely passed at the time. I called them back 2 weeks after that night in my kitchen. They were still interested. We finalized the terms over 4 phone calls and a video interview. I signed the offer letter from the Marriott. My last day in Atlanta was on a Tuesday. My movers came at 8 in the morning and were done by noon. Chief rode in the passenger seats of the Civic. All the way to Portland, which took us 3 days. I changed my phone number at a Verizon store in Birmingham on the way out of Georgia. I didn't leave a forwarding address anywhere that mattered. The silence I left behind must have been disorienting. First the calls going to voicemail. Then the voicemails bouncing back as undeliverable. Then, eventually my mother driving past the Decatur house and finding different people living there. Gavin texting into the void. My father calling Talia to ask if she'd heard anything. Which from what I understand she hadn't and said so. My mother emailed at one point. I'd changed my personal email address and set up an automatic forward that sent certain addresses directly to a folder I never opened. A measure that cost me about 4 minutes to configure. And apparently baffled them for months. My college friend texted to say Gavin had somehow found his number and called asking for mine. He told Gavin he hadn't heard from me. Which was technically true at that specific moment, since I'd called him rather than him calling me. Then he immediately texted me to say he'd handled it. That's the kind of friend worth keeping. My parents eventually hired a private investigator. I found out about this from my college friend, who heard it through someone who heard it through someone in Atlanta. I understand the PI found my employer and my general neighborhood within about 10 days. I was never hiding, I just wasn't available. There's a difference that people in crisis tend to collapse into one category. The call came on a Thursday evening. Number I didn't recognize, Oregon area code. I picked up thinking it was someone from a vendor account. It was my father. He said, "Don't hang up, please. Just stay on the line for 1 minute." I stayed on the line. He told me Gavin was in the hospital. The version I got was that Gavin had been unraveling for months. The drinking, the sleeplessness, the cycling. Through self-blame and self-justification, that apparently made him both miserable and exhausting to live with. 3 nights earlier he'd gone to a bar, gotten into a confrontation with someone he'd offended without fully understanding how, and come out of it badly. Fractured cheekbone. 2 cracked ribs. A concussion serious enough that they'd kept him in the ICU overnight for monitoring. He was stable now, he was going to be fine, but he was asking for me. Every time he woke up apparently, the first thing he asked was whether anyone had reached me. My father's voice was unsteady in a way I had never heard from him before. He'd always been the composed one. The voice of reason in the room. I waited until he finished. Then I said, "Is he going to survive?" My father said, "Yes." They said yes, the doctors are confident that. I said, "Then he's going to be fine. I'm glad he made it. Take good care of him." My father said, please don't hang up. We need you." I said, "I know you believe that. Take care of yourselves." And I ended the call. My mother called twice from the same number. I didn't answer. My father sent a text the next morning. "Please just let us know you're okay. 1 word. That's all we're asking." I put the phone in my desk drawer and went to my site visit. 2 weeks after the call, I walked out of my office building at 6:15 on a Thursday evening, and my father was standing on the sidewalk across the street. 63 years old. Grayer than I remembered. Or maybe I was remembering him wrong. It had been over a year. He was wearing the brown corduroy jacket he'd owned since I was in middle school. He looked smaller. Not diminished exactly. More like he'd stopped taking up space the way he used to. Like something in him had quietly contracted. He saw me and crossed the street. I stopped and waited. He said he wasn't there to fight. He said Gavin was home from the hospital and doing better. That the physical stuff was healing. That Gavin was in real therapy now. And actually engaging with it. Really trying. He said Gavin asked him to come. That every day Gavin told him to find me and tell me he was sorry. That he'd said it every day. Since everything fell apart. And he'd never stopped saying it. I said, "I heard you." My father took a step closer. Evening commuters were moving past us on both sides. Nobody looking at us. The city just continuing around this still point. Where 2 people stood not quite looking at each other. He said, "We know we made mistakes. Your mother and I have talked about this every day for over a year. We know we said the wrong things. We know we made you feel like we weren't in your corner when we should have been. We're asking for a chance to make that right. Just come home. Just once. Just dinner." I looked at him. The honest thing would have taken a long time to say fully. So I found the short version. I said, "You sat at your kitchen table and asked me what people were going to think. Not what I needed. Not whether I was okay. Your first thought was the neighborhood. Your second thought was about Gavin. About how he couldn't handle losing me. About how I was the strong one, and I could absorb this. You arranged the situation so that me forgiving Gavin was the version of events that cost your family the least. And you asked me to go along with that arrangement. And call it healing." My father started to say something. I said, "I'm not angry about it anymore. I want you to know that. I spent a few months being angry and then I just wasn't. What I am is done. Not as a punishment. Not to make you suffer. I'm done, because I figured out that staying required me to pretend that what happened was survivable. In a way that kept everyone at the same tables. And that pretending would have cost me something I'm not willing to pay." My father's eyes were wet. He said, "Don't you miss us?" I thought about it honestly before I answered. I said, "I miss who I thought we were when I was a kid. I miss believing that if something really bad happened, you'd be the people standing next to me. I miss that version of this family. But I figured out a while ago that version never quite existed. I was just too close to see it clearly. I picked up my bag. He said my name. I didn't turn around. I walked to my car, and I drove home and I fed Chief, and I ordered a pizza and watched something I don't even remember watching now, and I slept fine. That was 14 months ago. Gavin is at my parents' house, working part-time, going to therapy. I heard recently he's taking some classes at a community college, film theory, or something adjacent to it. Maybe that goes somewhere. I genuinely hope it does. I don't hate my brother. Hate would require ongoing investment, and I've invested enough. Talia is engaged. I noticed it the way you notice a weather update. Registered the information, moved on. My parents still have my number. My mother texts occasionally, short things, careful things. I read them. I don't respond. That's not forever necessarily. Maybe someday there's a conversation I'm ready to have. I don't know what shape it takes, or when it happens, or whether the window opens before one of us runs out of time. I think about that occasionally. I don't lose sleep over it. What I do have is this: the Portland apartment with the river view. Chief, who is 4 years old and has learned to open the cabinet under the kitchen sink, which is objectively impressive, and also a real problem. A job that challenges me in ways my old job had stopped doing. Years ago, we just closed a contract on a regional water treatment infrastructure project that'll keep my team busy through the following year and a half. I run the Esplanade on Saturday mornings. I have a standing dinner with people I actually like on Friday nights. I call my college friend every Sunday. I built this life in 14 months. Not from wreckage, from materials that were always mine. I just finally stopped lending them out to people who weren't paying them back. My father asked me on that Portland sidewalk if I missed them. What I didn't say, what I've turned over since, is that I also don't miss being the load-bearing wall. I don't miss being the one who handles things, who absorbs things, who gets described at every family gathering as the responsible one, in that particular tone. That means the one we don't have to worry about. I don't miss showing up to Sunday dinners and feeling like a stage prop in someone else's ongoing story. I was their safety net. And I didn't know it until the moment I needed them to be mine. And found out there was nothing underneath me at all. So I walked. That's not a tragedy, that's information. Chief just knocked over his water bowl. He's staring at me with the focused innocence of an animal who fully understands he did a thing and has chosen to present it as a mystery. I'm going to clean it up and order Thai food and be perfectly fine. In Atlanta tonight, Gavin is in the guest room. My parents are in the kitchen. The table where I used to eat has a chair that stays empty now, the same way it's been empty for going on 2 years. They made their choice. I made mine. I'm the only one of us who can live with it.